So I want to show that it's possible to mark multiple parts at one time in this EzCAD software that's included with the Chinese fiber laser. This part I'm going to mark is a simple aluminum part that's been anodized black, and it just has two holes in it. Now what I'm going to do is export a sketch from my CAD software, and it's going to wrap around these two holes. And all I want to do is mark one at a time initially, and then I want to be able to mark multiples. And I didn't know initially when I bought the laser if EzCAD could do that. I found out it's not a big deal, and I'm going to show you how. So first I'll open my sketch that I imported into EzCAD. Now for our purposes, I've already saved my imported DWG as an EzCAD file, so I'm just going to click open, and I'm going to choose this tight sketch. It's got an easy D ending to it, and you'll see that pops up here. I'm going to click this auto size button, so that zooms directly to resize so it's in my field of view. One thing that's interesting about EzCAD that's pretty similar to most CAD programs is that if you highlight something from left to right, it won't select that. See, this tight is all one sketch, it's all one object. So if I click it, you can see it's one object. It doesn't include this text down here, the patent pending. So if I go left to right, it won't select it unless I choose the entire body of text. Now if I go right to left and I choose any part of this, it selects the entire thing. It doesn't include the patent pending, that's a separate thing. You can see over here that one is the hatch, which just means I filled in the text, it wasn't outlined. And this is the combine, which is actually text I created in EzCAD directly. That was not imported from CAD. So if I go right to left and I choose any part of the patent pending, it chooses the entire thing. And if I have this mark select button checked, this little checkbox down here on the bottom left, that's going to say if I mark right now, then it's going to include everything that's selected on the screen. If I just have the tight selected and I choose mark select, it'll just mark the tight and not the patent pending. So what I want to do now is see how this shows up on my part. So all I'm going to do is choose the entire thing, and you don't have to choose mark select. If you unselected that, it would mark everything that's on your screen anywhere. Sometimes you'll have multiple things on the screen at once and you won't want to mark everything. That's the purpose of that. I like to keep it checked just because I oftentimes have a bunch of these parts marked at once, and I don't want to accidentally mark a bunch of things that aren't on the table. So I'm going to do that, select the whole thing, press the light here. You can also use F1 as a hotkey, but I'm going to choose this light button, and you can see it's now showing up on my part. I've already got it positioned correctly, but if it were positioned, let's say to the right, then it would be over there. That doesn't look quite right, so you can just move it around with the arrow keys, or you can drag it around with the mouse. I'll press stop, and I'll send it back to where it was. So we'll just light it again to make sure it's in the right spot. And that looks pretty good. So I'll press stop, and we'll do a test mark just to make sure it's okay. I'm going to choose mark select just because I like doing that. Down here it says it's going to make one part, and we've made a total of 4 parts. I'll reset the counter. Our settings over on the right side here say that we're going to use the default pen, and we have the frequency set to 28. I think the lowest you can go is 20, that would be the most powerful, and 60% power. Speed is going to be 700, that's kind of in the middle. You can go anywhere from, well, you can go anywhere from very slow to over 1,000 millimeters per second, which is pretty fast. So I'm going to mark this part just to see how it looks. So a couple seconds to mark it. Looks pretty good. So now I want to say, let's mark a bunch at a time. How do we do that? So let's say I just want to mark 3 at a time. Now there is a top and a bottom to this part, so I want to make sure it's oriented correctly. So what I'm going to do is keep the entire thing selected, and I'm going to go up to this modify button at the top. I'm going to choose array, and I'm going to choose rectangle. These two buttons up here just control the order in which it marks your array of let's say sketch objects. I don't really care if it goes left to right, top to bottom, whatever it wants is fine. I'll go left to right. So I want 3 of these next to each other, so my number of X objects is going to be 3. I'm just going to have one row, or one column, one row, 3 columns. So I'm going to say 1. I don't want to repeat this in Y. It's pretty much the exact same as patterning something in regular CAD software. For array X distance, these are 1-inch parts, so I'm going to go over 25.4 millimeters, 1 inch, and I'm not going to have any Y, but if I were, and I were doing 2, these are 3-inch parts, so it would be about 76. So then you have the option of choosing to calculate by offset distance or by graph distance. Graph distance, they explain this in the manual, and if I can, I'll show a picture of it. They show kind of from edge to edge as graph distance. So if I had them separated like this, it would be the distance between these 2 parts. For our purposes, I think it's a lot easier since I have the parallels laid out, just to say from center to center, it's 1 inch. So that's all I'm doing there, and I press OK. It will create the duplicates, and all I'm going to do is press zoom all again to put everything in the center. I'm going to highlight all, whoops. I'm going to highlight all 3 of these, and you can see everything on the left here is selected, all of the objects. I'm going to press light, and you can see how that shows up when it's lit. Kind of goes across every single part you have there. I'm going to press stop, and if you want to make sure that your spacing is correct, you can just select one of these. It's a little bit easier to see, and press light, and you can just see how it looks on the 3rd object. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to choose all 3 objects at once, and you can test mark 1 and then replace it, whatever you're comfortable with. So I selected all 3 of these at once, have the mark select button checked, kept all my settings the same, and now I'm going to mark them. And you can see that marked from left to right. Looks like it came out pretty good. I have done as many as 10 of these at once by doing 5 per row. The upside to doing that is you just click it and you can walk away for a minute or so. The downside to doing that is if you misposition a part or if you put something in upside down, you're going to end up scrapping, you could end up scrapping 5 parts or more at once, which I have done, and that's not so good. Not a huge advantage to doing 10 at once like there is on, let's say, a mill where you have to deal with tool changes and that sort of thing, which really cuts into time because loading time is that. So it's pretty quick. You don't really have to worry too much about marking 10 versus 5 at a time. So let's try to do 2 rows now. So I'm going to take, well, we don't have to start from all 3. Let's get rid of this first array. I'm going to highlight this again. I'm going to go into modify, I'll go into array, and this time we're going to still do 3, and then let's do 2 rows. So I'm going to keep my 76.2, and we'll calculate by offset again. So I'm going to say OK. Now we have 6 total parts here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing we did before, but I'm going to load 6 of these this time. Now I'm going to select the bottom right part, and I'm going to light it just to make sure I'm in the right position. That looks pretty good. And I'll select this one as well just to make sure I haven't made any errors. That looks fine. So I'm going to select everything and keep my mark select box checked, and I'm going to go ahead and mark. So that looks like it worked just fine. So you can see it's a little bit faster if you can load 6 parts at once versus 1 part at once. Only downside is you increase your risk of scrapping things just a little bit. And it can sure be fast to scrap parts, especially since this is probably the end of the process here, after you've got all the money put into your part. But I just wanted to show you, this is one of the things that I was wondering about when I bought the laser and when I started using EzCAD. Could I do this? Was it easy to mark multiple parts at one time? And I found that, yeah, not a big deal. So hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments.